Okay, get ready. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this next session, Campus Collaborations, Addressing Hunger, Food Waste, and Partnerships on the Campuses in Our Community. I'm Nick Goodfellow. I'm surprised I'm here for a second session in a row, this time as a moderator, though. So I'd like to quickly call on our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Cassie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Nick. Nice to be here and lovely to watch the sessions. Hopefully everyone's been enjoying the day so far. My name is Cassie Olovsson, and I'm the Director of Development at Food Recovery Network, which is a national organization that works with college students and other business and food system leaders all across the food supply chain to help them recover surplus food and donate it to communities experiencing hunger. So really excited to dig in all about campus collaborations with the group here today. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Cassie. Okay, Evan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Evan. I'm the founder and executive director of Sharing Excess. So I run the organization, and I started it as a student. So I'm really excited to share my story of how I created it and where we're at today and the work that we do, not only in Philadelphia, but cities all across the East Coast.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. Jaime?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jaime Hansen. I'm the executive director for Swipe Out Hunger. My pronouns are she and they. And I'm located in Boise, Idaho, and I'm only the second executive director for the organization. I come behind the founder, the charismatic, brilliant founder, Rachel Sumick. And I am super excited to be here today because this partnership, especially between CBOs, like the three that are on your screen right now, are super incredible. And the reason why Swipe Out Hunger is here today. So happy to go into that later on.
Well, thanks for being here, all of you. This is such an all-star panel. Really eager to get into the discussion. So what we want to do next is ask our audience to introduce themselves. So if you could, in the chat, name, where you're working at, if you're a student or an education staff, if you're working in campus food justice, if you're a food justice organization, if you're a food donor. We're really curious to know who is joining us so that we can help cater our messages to our audience. So just use the chat function to introduce yourself, and we'll be able to see it. Okay, so I'm going to now turn it over to Jaime, as my slides work, to talk about Swipe Out Hunger.
Sure. So I'm going to give you a high overview, but many of you on the call are probably already familiar with this. And if you're not, boo to you. Boo to you. Please don't take that personally. Oh, my goodness. We were founded in 2010 in Los Angeles. So we were incorporated in Southern California. Like Evan, we were founded by a UCLA student, again, Rachel, who saw great need across her campus in accessing food and housing. So initially, Swipe Out Hunger started with the idea that food will be supplied to students and individuals experiencing houselessness, and it grew from there. Now, this is a lie on the screen. We're now a part of 725 campuses across the United States, which means that we partner with them to deepen their anti-hunger programming. That could be meal swipe drives, that could be pantry and basic needs services. It could be providing connectivity to one another, that's peer-to-peer support. As all of you on this call know, it can feel really isolating in this work, so we want to make sure that we connect the dots to folks. But really at the center is the students. How can we ensure that students are able to achieve what they set out to achieve? How can they obtain higher education success in whatever way they define that? So I'll keep cruising along here, but I'm kind of one of those folks that like Cassie, Nick, Evan, you all jump in and we can just have a dialogue too, because we all do this work. We all have things to say. So go ahead to the next slide, Nick. Another lie, it's 725, it's bananas, it's outside of our control. We probably have campuses touching base with us weekly We just closed out our grant cycle, and I think we had 67 campuses join our network in the last month. So growing need, that's like a pro and a con, right? We'd love to put ourselves out of business. We would love for campuses to be like, we actually don't need your support. We have everything under control. We have student basic needs provided to everybody. Everyone's doing great. But unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing. And of course, the pandemic exacerbated that issue. So we were estimating back in 2019, we were starting conversations with the College and University Food Bank Alliance, also known as CUFBA, and they were estimating that there was about 750 pantries in the United States. And since we have about 3,500 degree granting institutions, that would be about 20% of all campuses were providing some level of anti-hunger programming. Pandemic changed all of that. Now we have very little knowledge, very little research to identify how many campuses are already providing these services or thinking about providing these services. But since we have 725 in our network alone, I know that it's a lot higher than the 750 estimated before the pandemic. We also have about 3 million meals. This is a really contentious number, as many of you on this call probably deal with on a daily. That 1.2 pounds to equate a meal is always kind of a hard thing to say because it's about the people. It's not about the number of meals. And we also know that there's duplicated and unduplicated resources and services and visits. So just know that we use this number because it's what people are used to. And we would love to learn from you all and be a part of conversations to develop what actual effectiveness looks like in the food supply chain, in the food charitable system, and in food justice overall. And also $205,000 is a lie. While we only support higher education campuses, I could feel everybody like clicking on our website right now to see about our grant process. We do only supply funding to higher education campuses. It could be a private or public institution, 2-year, 4-year, voc, tech, any kind of track. We just closed it a couple of days ago. But that number is a lie because we're giving out over $400,000 in grants this year. And again, pro and con. We had 280 applicants to this grant process. The need is significant. What can we do to change that is really where we're heading in the future. So again, we've got a lot of knowledge on this call. You just put it in there. Good.
So Jaime, I have a question about that. Do you mostly get a request from students or from education staff?
Mostly from education staff, although students fill out the application as well. We have a pretty low barrier application process, but they do have to gather some knowledge from their institution, like who do we send the check to and how can we ensure the check is reserved for the pantry service. We have a separate scholarship fund called the Nachman Justice Award that goes directly to students who are doing anti-hunger programming or advocacy work.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. So partnering, it's kind of like the whole kit and caboodle of this presentation, of this conversation. So I just want to call in, we have two kinds of partnerships. We have informal partnerships and formal partnerships. What you're seeing on the screen here is really our formal partnership structure. But Cassie, Evan, y'all are like nodding. The CBOs, the community benefit organizations on this call, we informally partner all of the time, sharing quantitative and qualitative information, best practices, potential funders, sharing board members, volunteers, student advocates. All of us are working in this space, and it's our responsibility to build these relationships with one another so that we can support this work. Unfortunately, there's plenty of work to go around. We need everybody at the table to do so. So those informal partnerships are really what I'd like to elevate today. Those are critical to success. And they're like the antithesis of our country, right? They operate outside of capitalism, typically. They operate outside of independence and like individualism. They really are there to say, hey, how can we care for one another and ensure that students or neighbors in our community are well taken care of? But formal partnerships, I'm just going to highlight one that's kind of interesting because it might get your brain going and like what you might do for your own organization or community. This last year, we formed an incredible partnership with LG Electronics. And at first, it was a difficult road to hoe. Many of you probably experience having to educate or re-educate people that you connect with. about what stereotypes, myths, misconceptions are out there about the community we serve. LG is no different. Although they came to the table with a significant amount of knowledge, we needed to shape them and better understand how this impacts higher education individuals. So LG initially said, hey, we'll give you a couple of refrigerators so that you all can increase the nutrition on your campuses. We said, awesome. A couple turned into 120 refrigerators. So we were able to go through our campus leader survey, see who had said, yes, I need and have space for a refrigerator. LG coordinated the delivery and the logistics. They donated the refrigerator to the campus, but then they also donated $1,500 so that the campus could stock that refrigerator with nutritious foods. And we know that many of our campuses are working with an average budget of $10,000 to $15,000 a year, and many of them are unable to partner with a food bank or food distribution site. So that was an incredible relationship that resulted in more food and longer lasting nutritious opportunities. On the flip side, I like to always highlight and end with, how can we make sure that we're taking the power and influence and authority of these corporations into the policy and process making arena? So Aramark is a really great example of, they contract a lobbyist. They have a whole lobbying firm that's there to say, hey, how do we get more food or SNAP retailer access to campuses or other, locations where they serve. And they said, hey, Swipe Out Hunger, come along to our lobbying meetings with those on the Hill and share with them what it's like on campuses. And that kind of influence and encouragement and space at the table can create a huge impact for our mission. I'm not from the East Coast, but I feel like I talk really fast. Was there any questions in the chat or anything that I could address, Nick?
Not yet. I'm not seeing any, but if you do have some for any of our panelists, please add them to the chat.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Oh, and of course, this is just shameless plugs. I have to end with this, right? Like, find us, check us out, see how we can support you, see how might we partner. Like, shocker, this is a partner panel. Like, how can we work together to create more food justice in the world? Connect with us. And you see the spelling of my name. It's Jaime like Jaime. And my email address is just jamie@swipehunger.org. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Cool. Thanks, Jaime. Appreciate it. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if you do have them, add them there. And I'll pass it over to Cassie.
Thank you, Nick. And a great session, Jaime, already kicking us off strong. So appreciate it. I will now give a brief overview of our work here at Food Recovery Network. I will say that there's so much overlap between Swipe Out Hunger, between Evan's organization. Back in 2019, when we had our last National Food Recovery Dialogue, our national conference, Evan and his team actually did the food recovery from our conference. I was on a call earlier with one of my team members that was saying how we have a campus chapter that applied for a Swipe Out grant that Jaime was talking about earlier. So there's so much intersections on this call, as I imagine in the chat as well. So thank you all for just chiming in and bouncing around with us. To provide an overview of Food Recovery Network for the folks that may not be aware, we're a national organization similar to Swipe that works with college students all across the U.S. as well as other food business leaders, other food system stakeholders to recover surplus food from across the supply chain and donate it to communities experiencing hunger. If we can go to the next slide, it'll show a map of our chapters all across the U.S. We have nearly 200 chapters across the U.S. And something I do want to highlight that we talked a bit when we were prepping for this panel is talking about how vastly different colleges all across the U.S. can be. A lot of times I get various questions from partners or funders of like, oh, how does this work? And looking for a blanket answer. And it's unfortunate, but always my answer is it depends, right? Are we talking of 2-year? Are we talking a 4-year institution? Are we talking about, an institution that's very well funded or one that is not funded at all? There's a variety of shapes and sizes of higher education all across the US. And what we do at Food Recovery Network is to help to provide student leaders with the resources, the tools, the funding, the framework to institute food recovery programs on their campuses so they can recover surplus food from their dining halls, from their local restaurants, either that be on campus or off campus, to be able to donate that food to communities experiencing hunger. Nearly half of our chapters across the US actually donate food back onto campuses into places like how Jaime was mentioning about on-campus food pantries or other community fridges or other pop-up events on campus to immediately support students on campus experiencing hunger. But FRN also works with off-campus institutions such as local food pantries or food banks or homeless shelters, other institutions that are serving other communities experiencing hunger. If you can go to the next slide, Nick. This gives a breakdown. Something else I wanted to touch on is Food Recovery Network, like Swipe, I imagine, like Evans Institution, touches more efforts beyond just immediately food recovery, right? We're not in just a silo of we're only talking about food waste. We're also talking about food justice. We're also talking about advocacy efforts. We're also talking about all the many different topics and activities that go along within our space. And so particularly in the pandemic, as students, no longer were able to gather on campuses in the same ways that they had been, FRN had said, how can we expand what it means to be in a Food Recovery Network chapter? We know that our students are engaging in various different ways beyond immediately recovering food from their campus. And so we started really intentionally tracking with our students what other ways they were activating. Was it advocacy efforts? Was it community engagement activities? And you can see here, the vast majority of our chapters are still actively engaged in food recovery, but there's also a good chunk, including 64% on the far right side, you can see are activated in multiple ways. They may be recovering food, but they may be also working with a nonprofit partner. They may also be advocating on their campus, working with groups like Swipe to set up, campus pantries. There was an example that I wanted to share at Augusta University in Augusta, Georgia. That's a medical institution. A lot of our students are studying to be doctors and nurses and going down into the medical route. And it was really interesting where they have a food recovery program and they donate to a local hunger fighting partner. And they were able to work with them to set up a dedicated pop-up medical service for the clients that are served from that organization and to do basic screenings to support the clients. And so not only did that provide a free service for the clients that are experiencing hunger, experiencing housing insecurity and other systemic issues, but also provide the students with a direct connection to those people that are receiving the food donations from their food recovery program. I mentioned earlier, there was also an example of a chapter that worked with Swipe to get a grant, and that was with Allegheny College in Pennsylvania, and they were actually able to set up the first food resources hub on their campus, setting up a food pantry, setting up a community fridge. And because of the students, they were actually bringing resources to fellow students. I'll send something in the chat in a minute. There's a really cute video that they posted on Instagram of them doing a ribbon cutting of this small little food resources hub. So I'll send that in the chat in a few minutes. It brings me joy. Nick, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Yes. I also did want to touch on at Food Recovery Network, we're also looking beyond higher education. Of course, we were started by students, similarly as Jaime said, as Evan will share as well, started by students that are really leading this work. And over the course of over a decade since we started at the University of Maryland in 2011, we've really started to look at where can food recovery happen beyond higher education. Of course, so many amazing food rescue organizations on this call right now. We started to look beyond higher education. And so particularly in the pandemic, we started partnering with the FarmLink project, which if anyone's familiar, they work on large commercial farms across the US. So we activate our students and our stakeholders to help volunteer to identify farms with surplus to work with FarmLink. We also have some of our actual student leaders doing gleaning projects. So on the left side, you'll see 2 students doing a gleaning. I really like this chapter and their story. So this is the Utah State chapter. And they actually started a program on their campus where they're gleaning surplus produce from local orchards and also individual people's homes, individual fruit trees. They like to call the groups as fruit tree owners, which I appreciate, rather than like a food donor. And particularly where Utah State is, it's a highly elderly population. So a lot of the folks that own these fruit trees may not be wanting to get up on ladders to harvest their fruit. And so the students go in and talk with the residents, of course, get approval from the residents to glean that produce from their various different fruit trees. They donate or they give any produce that the fruit tree owner is looking to keep or give to their friends and family, and then they donate the rest of the produce. And they've really expanded their program where they have hundreds of fruit tree owners and trees all throughout the city. They've also now gotten e-bikes to be able to bike around from one place to the next. So that's a fun, special story that I like to highlight. I'll also add on the other side. Oh, sorry, Nick, if you can go back. No problem at all. Thank you. I always just like to highlight this one. You'll see on the right side, that's our executive director, Regina, at a food recovery that we did from a VIP tailgate at the Super Bowl a couple years ago. And it's a little bit small here, but you can, if you look closely enough, you'll actually be able to see that those are crab legs that she's holding. And so we did a special food recovery, like I mentioned. Large scale events is something we've recently tapped into. So picture VIP, exclusive event at the Super Bowl, like a tailgate party. This was at the LA Super Bowl a few years ago. It was hosted by Guy Fieri and other celebrity chefs making really high quality foods like crab legs, meats, veggies, like really high quality stuff. And Food Recovery Network was there along with our student leaders and alumni in the local LA area to recover that surplus food and then donate it to local hunger fighting nonprofit. So we really tapped into other efforts beyond higher education, but always wanting to keep our students at the center. At every opportunity, we invite our student leaders to join us for these large-scale food recoveries. At that event, we had invited our student chapter leaders at Chapman University in Southern California, and they went home like very excited and activated to do larger scale recoveries. I always tell people, I'm like, at the Super Bowl, you can do it, like you can do it too. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. Thank you. So now that brings us just some numbers overall to share where FRN has been over the last decade or so. Of course, much more to grow and grow into. So as we close out here today for my session, just want to activate if you're looking to join a Food Recovery Network chapter. I'll send some links in the chat or also start a chapter. Also, if you are a food rescue organization that's looking to connect with higher education, there may be a chapter in your community that you want to partner with, get in touch with me and I'd be happy to connect you with our student leaders. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Cassie. And I'll hand it over to Evan.
Sorry, before Evan goes, I saw that there was a question in the chat for Cassie. Is that okay if I jump in with that? Sorry, Evan. I'm like blowing your spot.
All good.
I thought this was interesting.
Appreciate it, Jamie. I did not catch that.
Well, Autumn was asking about their FRN at Smith. It's separate from the FRN, like your network, which the student founder thought would help institutionalize a full-time salaried staff position to keep the work going. Amazing. And then she was wondering, or they were wondering, if they joined the Food Recovery Network, do you think that would help or hinder the proposal for this full-time staff position? Awesome. And just to follow up, their position is full-time but temp, and they have a 3-year contract with AmeriCorps.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's a good point and good question. Thanks for bringing that up, Jamie. Yeah, I will say that a lot of our chapters, again, no one size fits all, right? A lot of our students can be volunteer-based. Some of our chapters have funding based out of their university or their dining service provider to start the food recovery program. Some have full-time positions like this. I definitely anticipate that it would help. And I will also say, and we were talking on our prep call earlier, Jamie and I were like, whatever you call it, whether you call it a Food Recovery Network chapter, a SWIPE chapter, like these students are engaged in so many different ways. And so a lot of our chapters at Food Recovery Network call it something else, right? It's under the sustainability department. It's under the dining service provider. As long as you're doing the good work, we want to celebrate you. We want to uplift and provide support and frameworks. So happy to get in touch with you, Autumn, further about that, because I imagine that would support your position, and happy to get more into the details with you. Were there any other questions? I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
There were some other questions, but I think I'll save them till after Evan, since they were a little more broad and maybe a few folks could answer them.
Great. Sounds good.
Okay, Evan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cassie and Jaime, for setting the stage so well. My name's Evan. I'm the founder and executive director of Sharing Excess. So really excited to tell you a little bit of a different story, I guess, about how I was able to start an organization on campus, and we still work with colleges and universities as campuses, but a lot of our work is kind of spun off to more logistical operations that are helping to solve the barriers between excess and scarcity for a lot of large-scale food businesses. So yeah, we can jump right into it. I'll tell you how we kind of got there. But just as a whole, for our organization, we rescue and redistribute food by partnering with grocery stores, wholesalers, and farmers. We rescue and redistribute about 400,000 pounds of food every week. As Jaime was saying, we kind of go back and forth about how we quantify this, right? This is our unit of measure. So we literally measure the food with scales. 400,000 pounds or 1.2 pounds equals a meal, however you want to see that. Next slide. So yeah, I'm not sure why the font got all funky here, but it's still all the same info. So these are all numbers that I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with, but really what we're trying to focus in on is the fact that less than 2% of the food that's going to waste, the 40% of food or 100 billion plus meals, less than 2% of that actually ends up being donated. And as an organization, on the next slide, what we're trying to solve are the logistical barriers that can prevent this edible food from reaching communities, specifically for food businesses. So relating back to the transportation or limited storage or labor shortage that a food business may have to properly deal with their surplus food, we really want to create scalable solutions that are able to help these food businesses become champions of their community and also become zero waste, where they're not throwing away perfectly edible food. So we're not a food bank ourselves. We serve lots of different community organizations and food banks, and we try to make it as easy as possible for retailers, wholesalers, and farmers to donate. So again, a lot of the things that we're taking care of are covering the cost of transportation. We're doing sorting, a lot of the dirty work of like getting your hands in there for either actually sorting through good food versus bad, or picking up and delivering on a regular basis where that may be a barrier for donation for a lot of different food businesses. So I started Sharing Excess in 2018, originally as a student at Drexel University. I realized that I had about 50 meal swipes left in my dining account that I knew I wouldn't be able to use before the end of the term. So I made a spur of the moment decision, and I decided to swipe out all of those meals and put them in the back of my car. And I drove to Center City, Philadelphia, without really knowing what I was doing, and just started having conversations with people. You know, I opened my door, and on the next slide, you can probably see a couple images. So, you know, I really, you know, I packed up as many salads, pizzas, sandwiches as I could, and just started having conversations and, you know, letting people know, hey, this is food from my dining account, wasn't going to use it, and, you know, would you like a meal? And so I was surprised at how quickly it went, and how a few of the people that I was talking to were really particularly grateful for this food and explaining how this may be the only hot meal that they have that day. And it just left a huge impression on me. And it completely changed my life, actually. This was the inspiration for Sharing Excess. And yeah, on the next slide, I was studying entrepreneurship at Drexel. I knew I always wanted to start something. I had no idea that it would be a nonprofit, but this was what really grabbed my passion. And I was like, this is, you know, what I want to do. I didn't really care about, you know, making some kind of business to make money or whatever it was. I just wanted to make something that felt meaningful and I felt would make a net positive. So On the next slide here, I had some friends that I initially started it with. So one was my roommate and my friend Bianca, who worked at Trader Joe's. And so Bianca, every day on the next slide, she would see over 1,000 pounds of surplus food going to waste every day from her Trader Joe's. And she knew what I was doing with meal swipes. So she ended up giving me a call and saying, hey, is there any way you can come and pick this food up? So I basically, Tetris these banana boxes in the back of my car, filling it up as much as I could. And I started Googling the nearest shelters that I could take the food to. And this became my regular routine between classes. On the next slide here, you can see how it kind of grew to a grassroots movement, first at Drexel, but then spreading out to other colleges and universities around this idea of, okay, there's a lot of food out there and a lot of it's going to waste, not only on campus, but also in the surrounding community. How can we come together and literally drive in between classes to pick up from all of these restaurants and grocery stores and deliver out to a network of community organizations? So that's how it started. And then between 2018 and 2019, we established partnerships with maybe like 40 different restaurants and grocery stores. But then when the pandemic hit, there was a huge spike in food waste and food insecurity. There was a local article that came out on the Philadelphia Inquirer about what we were doing. And all of a sudden, food businesses from all over the place started reaching out saying, hey, I saw this article, local media, for any advice here for anyone that's starting their organization, local media can be your best friend in terms of helping you to get that initial jump out there. And just some small outreaches, you will not believe how receptive sometimes they can be to share your story and help to broaden your mission. So this really helped us to establish this kind of grassroots network again through COVID. On the next slide here, and a couple turned into a lot more. Dozens of folks kind of coming out of the woodworks to help us grow into a much larger organization. We had like 100 people reach out after that article came out, and we grew into a larger organization. On the next slide here, we found a warehouse on Facebook in West Philly that used to be a boxing gym. And, we had established ourselves as a nonprofit at this time. So we were fundraising. We got enough funds off the ground to rent this warehouse and rent a van off of Penske. And we started to grow. And you could kind of flip through the next couple slides here. But, we learned how to move higher volumes of food now that we had this warehouse, and we started contacting wholesalers and distributors, and we got really good at getting a truckload of food in one day and then redistributing that out by partnering up with hundreds of different community organizations. It really taught us to be very agile and reactive to when there was great food and when there were great organizations, and we could be that sort of scrappy, agile crew in between to help get it out on the same day. So we grew over the last 3 years to become, now we have a team of over 30 employees, and we work with hundreds of communities and organizations. And so on the next slide here, we've been able to rescue and redistribute now over 30 million pounds of food, which is roughly equivalent to about 23 million meals. It's hard to really grasp like the impact, as Jaime and Cassie know all too well. Like it's sometimes really lackluster to like put all of this work into just like one little line. There's so much great food and so much work that goes into every one of these. I mean, even 100 pounds of food can make a huge difference in a lot of lives. So we try our best, but it's very difficult. It seems like sometimes we're moving at 100 miles an hour and just every day trying to make sure that these higher volumes of food that we're getting now are properly allocated. But these two red dots, sorry, Nick. These two red dots are where we have our warehouses. I'll tell you about our second one, which is really where we've started to fly. But we have started to work on logistics in other states. So we work with carrier companies and these logistics providers where we're able to help rescue food in other states, as far as like California and Texas when we get calls for it. But majority of our operations are really based on the East Coast, with our whole team being based in Philly and now just recently New York City. On the next slide here, we work with over 190 food businesses. We don't work with 190 every day, There's some that donate on a daily basis. There are some that are weekly or monthly. Some that have just donated one time. But they're in all different shapes and sizes of grocery stores, wholesalers, farmers, and cafes. And we try to right size it all. But I would say as an organization, we're starting to lean more and more towards the higher volume food donors that are mainly the wholesalers that we work with.
Evan, there was a quick question in the chat about your warehouses. Are they cold storage warehouses?
So one of them is. It might be on the next slide here. Okay, so we'll flip through this quick, but I will get to that question. So a big piece of what we do is retail rescue, where we don't need a warehouse at all. So these are vans and vehicles. You can skip through these next photos pretty quickly. Either volunteers or full-time van drivers that are picking up on a daily basis from grocery stores like Trader Joe's. We work with 15 of their stores locally. And so, that's an example of a daily pickup. And the drivers are using a mobile app that we created. A lot of really talented students that 14 developers now over 4 years have helped us create this mobile app that helps us to track everything that we're doing. So you weigh the food and you enter it in here. You get your routes, you know where to pick up and where to deliver. We also have great analytics so that we can see what our impact looks like on a monthly basis. So this is the cold storage warehouse that we're based out of. This is the Philadelphia wholesale produce market. I would say as an organization, we've always kind of followed this model of follow the food. So this is an example of this. We were working with grocery stores primarily, but then we got word that the Philadelphia wholesale produce market, this 700,000 square foot refrigerated warehouse, was throwing away over 10 million pounds of edible food every year. And this is mostly fruits and vegetables. So we created a sorting operation inside of this wholesale market that you can see in the photos following this one, where basically inside they gave us some warehouse space that they were using originally as like a maintenance shed. And we started a sorting line. So we every day the vendors that are there have these pallets of food that stand taller than I am, right? And it's thousands of pounds of food every day, about 30 to 40,000 pounds of food every day that these vendors can't sell. On these next slides, you'll see kind of some of the food that we get, and it's bulk produce. There's a huge value in this, obviously, for communities that do not have as good of access to fresh and affordable food like this. So in these boxes, on the next slides here, you'll see there are maybe some minor aesthetic imperfections. Nothing that would dissuade you or I from eating these fruits or vegetables, but maybe Walmart as a buyer, they're going to reject 10 pallets if they see even one bad imperfection, because they're trying to buy for their entire chain and they need it to have a certain amount of life on the product to survive that sales process. You can hit next here. So every day we're basically surrounded by this produce, and our job is to redistribute it out in the same day that we receive it. In the next couple slides here, actually that was the end of that. But we created a sorting operation where any of the produce that's not edible for human consumption, we'll turn that into animal feed. So we have a network of farms where we bring all of that food. But everything that is edible goes out to our community partners. I believe we now work with we have worked with over 500 community organizations, ranging from food banks to faith-based orgs, or your pantries, your shelters, your apartment buildings for seniors. You name it. If you're a community organization that has some touch point within the community and wants to help distribute food, we really are very open to working with everybody, including mutual aid organizations of all shapes and sizes. When these organizations are doing distributions, typically it's in these open access, choice model where the food is displayed out and folks can grab a bag and grab whatever they like, no questions asked. This is obviously a world that we would love to see, right? Where food is something that's plentiful and available. And, the numbers tell us that there's more than enough food out there. It's just a matter of being able to provide access for everyone to be able to use it. So we try to do that with distributions. 99% of the food that we rescue goes to other organizations to distribute. But about 1% of food that we rescue we'll distribute ourselves in these pop-ups where we set up tents and tables with our chapters, where they distribute it directly to the community. It keeps us close to the work. It's honestly the most fun that we have as an organization. We're doing a lot of logistical work. So when we can actually get out there and have our regular weekly pop-ups at the same park in Philadelphia, really helps us to stay close and get crucial feedback from community members that are taking the food. So of course we worked with students as well. That's where we emanated out of. We have over 30 chapters now, ranging from colleges to universities and high schools as well. A lot of them are based in the Philly area. We do get interest for chapters from all across the United States, but I would say that Food Recovery Network and Swipe Out Hunger are probably a little better enabled to be able to actually have those chapters be independently set up and able to activate their missions of food rescue. Whereas, we're doing a lot of logistical work here in Philadelphia, and we can have chapters be supplemental to that, help us, volunteer when possible or distribute food in their communities. But it's a lot of our work has been so laborious and logistically involved that it's tough for us to put all of that weight on student chapters to just go out there and now pick up every single day at every beck and call of a grocery store, because that's what they require. So we're still kind of working on our national model for chapters, but right now it's been very regional for us and supplemental to the work that our standalone nonprofit does. But our work is starting to scale out to other states, especially with direct link and retail rescue. So again, in like Texas or Arizona or California, we can work with some farms out there or wholesalers or distributors. If they have surplus, we're able to pick up with the tractor trailer and deliver out. We're really big partners with the FarmLink project as well. So we can either forward food their way, or they can send food to us and we can distribute it. We love working with all of the other food rescue organizations that are in this space. And where we try to find ourselves is that like kind of middle ground player that's able to work in those gaps that need some kind of like odd logistical solution, like these wholesale markets in Philadelphia and most recently in New York City, which is our newest adventure. I'll save that for the next conference. But that's my story so far. I really appreciate everybody for setting up this incredible conference, and just the more we can talk about this work, I think it helps us all. And I just can't wait to answer any questions anyone may have. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Evan. Great work. That's really inspiring. So we've got a question from Alex in the chat about reaching large chains. Alex says, I find it difficult to navigate large corporations and speaking to someone who can actually make decisions. Is there someone on your staff with a sales background who's able to sell your program to large corporations?
Yeah, that is a great question. What's really helped with us establishing those like large chain partnerships, first of all, is starting small. So starting with one. I'd say Trader Joe's is a good example of where we started with one store, and then we got good word of mouth and always had a mindset of, okay, what's the next one that we can work with? And that slowly bubbled up to enough support on the lowest possible level of that like corporate chain to be able to say, hey, can you make an introduction to who runs this for the whole chain? And so when we got introduced to that person, they saw that we did have some credibility and some operations already established with their stores. And that helped to build that case of, hey, if you have other stores that we can work with, please consider us for that. It takes years, though. It's not ever just like, hey, how's it going? All right, you're in all of our places. There's a lot of trust. And again, there's a lot of dependability that's needed. You have to be very consistent. With the Philadelphia wholesale produce market, for example, that was something where I would say we got really lucky. There was a gap because COVID had a kind of really shaken up the supply chain. Their waste was at an astronomical level. and they were spending over $1 million a year on the waste costs alone. So they had a financial problem, and we approached it as a financial solution. Immediately we picked up on that first meeting that we had with the GM of that produce market. We picked up on, this is more important from a financial perspective for them than a philanthropic perspective, right? Which sometimes a lot of donors are driven by, what can I do for the community? Others are driven by how can I reduce my bottom line. So for this particular one, that's was the case, and we pitched it as that, knowing, of course, with our heart, we're trying to support the community, but this could be a great avenue for them. The other piece I'd say is storytelling. Of course, as you guys saw, like when I'm explaining to you what I do today, I always start with the story of how did it begin? Because at this at the bare cost of it all, that person that you're talking to is a person as well, and they have a story, and they can connect with your story and your intentions as to why you started to do something good. And if you can share that story, then they can relate to it, and they can be a part of your story now. So I always am a huge proponent for leading with your story, because I think that other people then want to join and be a part of your story too.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, not too much time. And based on the folks who've introduced themselves in the chat, thanks for doing that. A lot of our audience are food recovery, food rescue organizations. And in the context of working with campuses, I'm curious if you all have some advice on, tips on working with a campus if you've not worked with one before, or how to maintain or build sustainable relationships with campuses, either with ones that have existing recovery programs or food justice programs or don't. Maybe Cassie, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Something we talk about a lot when we talk about college students, right, is the constant turnover of college students, whether it be 2 year, 4 years, somewhere in between or beyond. And so for us at Food Recovery Network, we call it, like, a lot of our full spring is leadership transition and passing the torch from one group of college students to the next, especially when students are graduating. So I would say just keeping that in mind when you're thinking about working with college students. Also, as Evan said before, like having some difficulty in terms of the commitment levels of students, right? When we were prepping for this call, we were talking a lot about privilege and what it takes to have the time capacity to volunteer, to do food recovery beyond school, beyond jobs that students may have. So I would say just keeping a lot of these topics in mind and kind of knowing that you're working with students. And on the pro side is students' schedules can be very flexible a lot of the times, right? Food Recovery Network, a lot of times it can work for us to have students do food recoveries because they're available late at night or in the middle of a work day, whereas other people may not be able to do that in terms of food recovery. I would also suggest getting in touch with staff and faculty on campus, such as Nick at the University of Pittsburgh, that are more of a consistent torch holder for a chapter or for a program on campus when available. And then also just finding your champions. Like I said, no one size fits all. And so some students will be ultra engaged and activated and wanting to work with your group or your organization. And then the next iteration might come in and may not be as activated, but maybe activated in other ways. And so just finding your champions within the chapter, within the campus that really want to drive this partnership and work forward, and really just leaning into that.
Awesome. Thanks. And actually, Cassie, while you're on here, do you want to address Mary's question very quickly? Are there any work to recover excess prepared foods from food courts? I mean, on our campus, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's definitely the vast majority of the food recovery work that Food Recovery Network does. Because as you can imagine, right, a campus dining hall that may be buffet style or cook to serve or whatever it may be. Of course, we're keeping food safety top of mind. So it's anything left in the kitchen that's still in a food safe environment. But definitely the vast majority of the food that our student chapters recover is prepared foods.
Thanks, Cassie. Okay, Jaime, any tips or advice on working with campuses?
I just wanted to double down on what Cassie said and say you do need the student voice in order to make change at the administrative level, but it has to be done in parallel. you need buy-in from all parties, essentially, in order to create or establish any kind of infrastructure that's going to outlast a student's school year. I would say the student voice is so critical, and their perspective is what's going to create change and the right kind of services on campus. And Cassie touched on this. I just want to elaborate a little bit more. Make sure as an organization that you're utilizing and being respectful of this student experience, because there is trauma attached to lived experience. It can be really painful to share your story and have that repeated over and over again. So be mindful where and who and how you apply that student perspective. It can just be helpful just to open up the conversation and say, do you have capacity for this emotionally, physically, schedule-wise, all of that. So students are ready. Students are doing the work. We have all three of our organizations have thousands and thousands of students that are like raising their hand saying, how can we get this done? And so they're ready. They're there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jaime. Okay, Evan, with the last word, any advice on working with campuses?
I think everything that's been said is exactly what I would echo. And just Cassie, to reiterate, I think something that's been super helpful is just having that like legacy administrator or professor or supporter that is there, obviously, even past when students may be graduating, to help to continue the leadership of it. You can see a lot of turnover. And so to have that one champion who you at least have some sense is going to be at the university for a long period of time, relying on them to really instill the passion and the passing the torch to the next leader that will continue the chapter and the organization is so important. So definitely build out a board. I would say not just even one administrator, but like a legacy board of folks who are passionate about it at the university.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. It's been a great panel. I really appreciate your contributions. Thanks to folks in the chat who've been chiming in with questions. And good luck, everybody. Great work. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Great job moderating. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Everyone. Take care.
Bye.